Welcome to the Times of India. You're watching Global Pulse with me, Neha Khanna. Our big focus tonight. Could the next few weeks reshape global geopolitics? Why do we ask? Here's why. Reports suggest that Prime Minister Narendra Modi could meet US President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York next month. Prime Minister Modi is most certainly scheduled to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or SCO Summit in China on the 31st of August. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is expected to visit India next week. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is likely to hold talks with his Russian counterpart Sergey Lavrov in Moscow on the 21st of August. Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected to visit India at the end of this year, and of course the one big summit that everyone will be glued to. Trump will meet Putin in Alaska in the United States later this week on the 15th of August to be precise. And ahead of that crucial summit, Ukrainian President Volodomyr Zelensky is in Germany. He will hold a video conference with Trump and other NATO leaders to discuss the Russia-Ukraine war and the various possibilities that could emerge from Trump's talks with Putin. It's all happening out there. Let's break it down for you. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is likely to visit the United States next month for the United Nations General Assembly, and plans are underway, reports suggest, to schedule a meeting with President Donald Trump to iron out issues on trade amid heightened tensions between the two countries. Trump recently imposed trade tariffs as high as 50% on India. He has labelled it punishment for India buying Russian oil and accused New Delhi of fattening Putin's war coffers. With this, Trump has placed India in the same category as Brazil, both of which now face the highest US tariffs in the world. This as Trump has conveniently gone soft on China, the largest global buyer of Russian oil, even pausing the China tariffs for another 90-day period. Not only that, Trump has hurled multiple insults at India, calling it a dead economy, among other things. And in several moves that have offended India, Trump has been going out of his way to court Pakistan and its army chief, Asif Munir. Most in India believe that with his tantrums and downright hostile behavior, Trump has deeply hurt the India-US relationship and set it back by several years, if not decades. Despite that, some have expressed optimism that if Prime Minister Modi and Trump meet, perhaps the two leaders could iron out some of the major differences that have become sticking points, and perhaps the two can still hammer out a trade deal that would be beneficial to both countries. And if the two leaders do meet next month, it will be their second meeting in 7 months after Prime Minister Modi visited the White House in February this year, soon after Trump's inauguration as president in his second term. So, how that meeting goes, or whether it'll even take place, and whether Trump would be open to retracting the punitive tariffs on India, may actually depend on how Trump's meeting with Putin goes this week. Trump is losing his patience with Russia and wants to see an end to its war with Ukraine at the earliest. But pulling that off is not going to be easy by any stretch of imagination, especially given the fact that Zelensky has made it abundantly clear that Ukraine will not give up any of its territory. Now, going back to the Modi-Trump meeting in September. Some say if that meeting does go well, Prime Minister Modi is likely to personally invite Trump to visit India for the Quad Summit, which is scheduled to be held in October. Australia and Japan are the other members of the Quad. Now, during Trump's first term, he and Prime Minister Modi had forged a personal bond. But that camaraderie has been rocked by Trump's bluster on tariffs and pretty shocking hostility in his second term, despite the US president calling Prime Minister Modi a friend on multiple occasions. The most important barometer of the success of any such meeting would be whether the two leaders are able to make significant headway in the India-US trade deal, which has been stuck over many issues, especially India's refusal to open up its agriculture and dairy sectors to the US in the larger interest of the Indian farmers. Another key issue that has become a flashpoint between the United States and India is New Delhi's purchase of Russian oil, a revenue source the White House insists that is sustaining Moscow's war in Ukraine. Trump has been lashing out at India over its Russian oil purchases and pressuring New Delhi into cutting down on imports in the hope that threatening a key trade partner would force Moscow's hand into ending the Ukraine war. India, for its part, has strongly countered the US allegation while accusing it of hypocrisy and pointing out that American companies continue to buy uranium, chemicals and fertilizers from Russia. Therefore, India will closely follow the meeting between Trump and Putin on the 15th of August. Meanwhile, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar will visit Moscow on the 21st of this month, where he will hold talks with his Russian counterpart, Sergey Lavrov. Earlier, over the weekend, Prime Minister Modi held a detailed phone conversation with President Putin. The two leaders discussed developments in Ukraine, with Prime Minister Modi reiterating India's consistent position for a peaceful resolution. India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, met with the Russian president just last week, a day after Trump announced higher tariffs on Indian imports in response to India's continued purchase of Russian oil. By the end of this year, Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected to visit India, which would be his first visit to the country since he launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, leading to Moscow's diplomatic isolation in the world. Later this month, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit China to attend the SCO Summit. Putin is also expected to attend that summit. Significantly, in the wake of Trump's tariff war on the world, which is set to hit India the hardest, there have been suggestions that India should work with Russia and China bilaterally or multilaterally in forums like the RIC to seek alternatives to the US export market. Of course, there are concerns that RIC will be a China-dominated group and therefore not likely to be in India's favour, given the long history of fraught ties between India and China on account of their border dispute as well as regional rivalry and competing interests in the economic sphere. Not to mention China's growing expansionism and aggression both in the region and on the global stage. The question, however, is simply this: could the next few weeks prove critical in realigning geopolitical forces around the globe?
This is a listening exercise for the president. Look, only one party that's involved in this war is going to be present. And so this is for the president to go and to get, again, a more firm and better understanding of how we can hopefully bring this war to an end.
I would say that our relationship with both nations is as it has been, which is good. And that is the benefit of having a president who knows everyone, talks to everyone, and that is how we can bring differences together in this case. So,
all right, a lot to unpack here. Let's now go across to our panel of experts. Joining me on Global Pulse tonight is Raymond Vickery. He's former United States Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development. Thanks very much, Mr. Vickery, for joining us. Welcome back to Global Pulse. We're also joined by Robindra Sachdeva. He is the founding president of the Imagine India Institute and director of the US-India Political Action Committee. And in just a moment, we're also hoping to be joined by Ambassador Shashank, former Foreign Secretary of India. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me. Mr. Raymond Vickery, let me begin with you. Like I said, a lot to unpack here. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, reports suggest, could meet US President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly next month in New York. Prime Minister Modi is definitely scheduled to travel to China later this month for the SCO Summit. We know that the Chinese Foreign Minister will be in India next week. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is going to meet his Russian counterpart in Moscow on the 21st of August. If reports are to be believed, the Russian President Vladimir Putin is likely to visit India later this year, and the one big summit that everyone will be watching very closely, the Trump-Putin talks in Alaska later this week. The question we're asking on the show tonight is this: do you believe that the next few days and weeks could be absolutely critical in global geopolitics? And are we likely to see some sort of realignment of geopolitical forces and interests in the process? What's your take?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think the realignment is already taking place, and it's taking place because President Trump has largely destroyed or jettisoned the multilateral approach to international peace and security, which we've had since World War II. At the end of that disastrous war, where millions and millions were killed, the nations of the world, including an independent India, decided that there would be an adherence to principles about non-invasion, about a rules-based international order. President Trump, unfortunately, has jettisoned all that in favor of a real estate developer's approach of transactions. You make a transaction with one country, you don't worry about what the relationship is. What you worry about is whether or not President Trump can be seen as a victor and have triumphed in that transaction. In my judgment, this is not sustainable in the long run. It's not in the interest of India, the U.S., or the world. What it leads to is what we've had prior to World Wars I and II, and that is each country trying to make it first to aggrandize its own situation. So what I see happening here is a continuation of the new transactional approach that the United States has, under President Trump, put in place. My hope is that the world will see, particularly great democracies like India, that peace is not a one-off kind of a situation. Peace, like war, must be waged. It must be waged with others, and it must be waged on principle rather than immediate benefit, whether that be arms, oil, access, whatever. So one would hope that India, under Prime Minister Modi, will adhere to the values which are established in the Indian Constitution, and which up until recently had been shared by the United States. So I think it's a very crucial time, but I don't see what happens in the next few weeks being anything but a continuation of the new system which President Trump is trying to follow.
Interesting. You say that a realignment of forces is perhaps already taking place on the global stage. Before I take this to Rabindra Sanchdeva, I want to ask you another question, Mr. Vickery. I think we can all agree that in just the first months of his presidency, Donald Trump has caused a fair bit of chaos and upheaval in the international order. There's a lot that is now being said about a possible meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Trump in New York next month on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. It's not confirmed yet, but reports suggest the two leaders could in fact meet. Now, you know that in recent weeks, the India-US relationship has been under greater pressure than it has been in close to 3 decades. There's been growing friction thanks to President Trump's increasing hostility towards India, the kind of punitive tariffs that he slapped on India in the name of Russian oil, or the fact that he's hurled insults at India, calling it a dead economy, or the fact that he's going out of his way to woo Pakistan. Given the sort of tensions that we've seen in the recent past and the fact that a trade deal between the two countries has proved to be elusive so far, Are you optimistic that if the two leaders were to sit down and actually talk to each other face to face, there is a strong chance that the very sharp differences that have emerged in trade negotiations in recent weeks could in fact be ironed out, and at the end of it, we may actually have an India-US trade deal on our hands?
Well, one has to be hopeful and optimistic, but the reality is that President Trump has done more in 24 hours to destroy 30 years of efforts by India and the United States to reconcile, to open up economies and trade, to stand together against China, to be in favor of a Quad, which tries to have open sea lanes. And we have worked together on so many issues, and we've come so far, really since the early 1990s when I was in government, under Republican and Democratic administrations alike. This is very regrettable. There is no issue upon which these two great democracies should not cooperate, and it is a fundamental to be able to do that. But I think that there can be some smoothing over by this summit, if you will, in September at the UN between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. But it's not going to solve the underlying problems, and India must adhere to its values and really help us in the United States, who are trying to get back to some semblance of constitutional order in this country.
Okay, interesting. So, cautious optimism there on your part. Ambassador Shashank, welcome to Global Pulse. Great to have you with us on the show once again. Let me put to you the same question that I put to Raymond Vickery. At the moment, there's only speculation, no confirmation, but reports seem to suggest that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump could in fact meet on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York next month. Now, we can all agree that the India-US relationship has been under tremendous strain of late, with President Trump slapping punitive tariffs on India, punishing it really for buying Russian oil, calling it a dead economy, and also wooing Pakistan, which clearly has angered and offended many here in this country. Add to it the fact that a trade deal, of course, has been stuck over different issues. Are you of the belief, sir, that if the two leaders do sit down and talk to each other, there is a strong chance that the differences that have cropped up between the two sides, especially in the trade negotiations, could in fact be ironed out, and we could have an India-US trade deal at the end of the day? Or do you believe that is too optimistic a view, given how sharp the differences seem to be between the two sides and on multiple issues?
Neha, as of now, I think it's more of a media hype because I have not seen any concrete thing either from the Indian government side or the US government. So I presume that both sides are preparing themselves for other summit level interactions, which are important for them. And of course, we would be studying, for example, the 15th August meeting between President Putin and President Trump. And that seems to be so difficult because, as we just heard people from the United States, that since only one party is there, so President Trump would be listening to the views of the Soviet Union, to the Russians, and see whether Russia is willing to make any advances to his land deal proposal. So I think while India has spoken, our Prime Minister has spoken to President Putin, he has talked about publicly, has also spoken to President Zelensky. Idea has been that India has reiterated that there should be peace, there should be a peaceful solution to all the disputes, and this is not an era of war. But that is that. I think President Zelensky said that there is no question at all, unless he gets the approval from his cabinet, from his people, he is not going to give up any territory. and the Europeans are totally with him. Putin is not willing to give up any territory that he has won. In fact, he wants some of the territories which are partly with him to be part of the negotiation and to be transferred to Russia. So I do not know whether we can, at this stage, we can talk about any optimism in the India-US trade deal. I presume that we should first wait for the 15th of August meeting,
Yes.
and then let us also see the meetings at the level of the foreign ministers, the meeting of the SCO, and I think then perhaps we'll have an idea. Perhaps after this meeting, we can again talk to President Putin and President Trump's people and see is there any progress being made or not. If no progress, then I think President Trump has already announced that there is no way that any trade negotiation can take place with India unless things are settled.
You make fair points, sir. So let me ask you this question. Of course, there is no change in the stance of Ukraine and Russia vis-a-vis the ongoing war. Both sides are digging their heels in. And as desperate as Trump may be to achieve a breakthrough and put an end to this war, we don't really know what's going to come out of the Putin-Trump summit in Alaska come the 15th of August. So let me ask you this question. How well the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump goes in the month of September, or whether that meeting is going to take place at all. Do you believe that could actually be determined by the outcome of the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska?
As I said, that it would very much depend if there is a positive outcome and President Trump gets an assessment that yes, he can make a deal with President Putin. Then I think he should first of all then announce this rollback of this 25% tariff on India's purchase of Russian oil. There is no doubt that India has increased its purchases of oil and other commodities from USA, but it does not mean that India should continue to do that under the threat of 25% plus 1% penalty in this matter without any progress on the real issue between USA and Russia. So I think that is remains. And second point, I must say that the way United Nations and USA have been mollycoddling the Pakistani military dictators and leaders, and they are threatening the whole world. They're threatening India in particular and Indian industries. I don't think there is a mood in India at this stage to overlook the terrorism which has been spread and now a nuclear attack which is being promised to India and to the world by Pakistani military chief. So I do not know where do we end up. I mean, would Prime Minister Modi go to the United Nations and complain to the UN about this? No, I think we have to prepare ourselves how to deal with this situation. And I think this Sergey Lavrov had said that yes, RIC needs to be once again considered. And while we know that if we are bilaterally dealing whether with big powers like USA or China, India has to come under. But on the other hand, if RIC is there, if BRICS is there, if our East Asia Summit process is there, and we can then try to build up a kind of a peaceful and more balanced atmosphere with reference to countries like China and USA.
Right. So we'll come to the point about RIC in just a moment, but you're right, of course, in pointing out those obnoxious remarks that were made by Asim Munir recently in the United States. In fact, we have focused on that on this show over the last couple of days, and what was truly appalling is the fact that he felt free to issue a nuclear threat to India and the world from American soil. And fact of the matter is that there's not been a single statement from the Trump administration on that nuclear blackmail, no condemnation whatsoever. We're still waiting to see if President Trump is going to react at all to what was said by Asim Munir. But let me take this to Rabinder Sachdeva. Rabinder Sachdeva, two questions that are directly interlinked, it would seem at this point. Number one, of course, we don't know if Prime Minister Modi will for sure meet President Trump next week, but there's a possibility. There is definitely speculation at this point. If that meeting does happen, do you share the optimism of those who say the two leaders may finally be able to iron out the wrinkles in this relationship, and the temperatures may come down and we may even have a trade deal? And two, how significant do you think the outcome of the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska is going to be for India-US ties in the near future?
Sure. Thank you, Neha. A pleasure with you and our esteemed colleagues. First, as to if a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump happens, and hopefully positive outcomes come out of that. Hopefully, some wrinkles are sorted out, smoothed out. But I think, unfortunately, as my other colleagues might agree or may disagree, there has been a lot of loss of trust between the US and India. So fine, in the short run, with regards to the trade deal, something could happen. We would adjust. I mean, I think India is happy to adjust, but you got to understand our position at some points. We are happy to adjust with America, no doubt. But the way American foreign policy under President Trump has been, kind of going through the last few months, not only on trade, and now especially on Pakistan, I think the public opinion in India is unfortunately very much now back to maybe the early 90s or
Yeah.
early 2000s before the US India nuclear deal. You see, the US India nuclear deal was supposed to be a deal not only about atoms, it was atoms for peace and trust between the US and India, right? So, and a lot of hard work was done by gentlemen like Ray and Ambassador Shashank, of course. Now, all of that background, I think, has been jolted. So, yes, we would expect a positive outcome, and India would want to keep a working relationship. The more, the better with America. But that is going to leave an overhang in public opinion, and also, I think, in our officialdom in terms of the policies they frame in the next few years. One. Secondly, yes, of course, very much the Putin Trump meeting in Alaska would have an impact. You see, what is happening, I think, in a big picture as we're talking, the world of today is in a flux. And in fact, I have a model I can show you quickly. We were talking, each nation is looking to, create its own linkages, cross linkages at this point of time. The world, in a way, is rebooting. Nations are reconsidering alliances, partnerships, how trustworthy or how reliable, and it's everyone out for yourself. And in some ways, I think planet Earth is heading back to the jungle in terms of, might is right and survival of the fittest. Now, the meeting between Putin and Trump is important for India, definitely yes, because if the question of if there is some common page understanding between the two, and America says, okay, fine, Russia, you're welcome back into the fold. We'll discuss with Ukraine. And yeah, no sanctions or no secondary sanctions on the people who buy oil from you. Then it positively impacts it. But in all probability, if something like this is not the outcome, then it would mean that the sanctions, 25% due to Russian oil, will continue on us. And if those sanctions continue on us, obviously, it will have an impact on our calculus, on our thinking, on our geopolitical understanding. When Jaishankar goes to Moscow or Prime Minister Modi goes to the SCO meetings end of this month. So you see, it's like brick by brick, the world is under a reconstruction. Each piece, in some ways, lends to the next one, but there are multiple side vectoral pieces going on. Now, as to the Munir threat, my sense is that, somebody should convey a message to Trump that, his legacy of the global peacemaker, or his legacy as a peace president would be shattered and lie in ruins if half the world burns under a Trump presidency. Somebody should explain to him, and I think he should get this message or understand this, that if Munir did not only say that if we go down Pakistan, we'll take India down with us. That's another matter, right? Munir in Florida, he was reading a script. So that means prepared remarks to the Pakistan diaspora. He said that if we go down, we'll take half the world down with us. So if
Yeah.
he's going to do this, and here Trump is mollycoddling him, somebody should remind Trump that your legacy as a peace president, global peacemaker, will lie in ruins and ashes
Yes.
unless you rein this gentleman. So
I
there are
couldn't agree
multiple
more
things out
with
there.
you. I find it most ironical that Donald Trump, on the one hand, is projecting himself as the world's greatest peacemaker, even hankering after a Nobel Peace Prize, while at the same time flirting with a terror state like Pakistan and frankly looking the other way as Asim Munir threatens India and the whole world from American soil. I think that is a very situation that President Trump needs to address, unless, of course, Asim Munir has made these remarks with tacit approval from Donald Trump, and that would be very, very serious as well. And I agree with you when you say that, at the moment there seems to be such an upheaval all around that it seems like the geopolitical structure is under reconstruction. Let me therefore take this back to Raymond Vickery. Mr. Vickery, Ambassador Shashank talked about RIC. I also mentioned it at the start of this show. Now, given the growing tensions between India and the United States and the fact that Donald Trump has unleashed a tariff war on pretty much the entire world, there are many who are saying there needs to be a realignment. And it is time, really, for RIC, Russia, India and China, to work closely together. There are two aspects to this. One is there are those who believe that Trump may unintentionally end up pushing India closer to Russia and China, something that he's not going to be very happy about later if this were to materialize. But then the other school of thought is, an RIC is going to be dominated by a hegemonic, expansionist and aggressive China. And that is not likely to be in India's favor, given the long history of fraught ties between India and China and, of course, the regional rivalry, especially in, the economic sphere. What's your take on everyone who's now suddenly talking about RIC?
Well, my take is that India has to decide where its long-term interests lie. And they certainly do not lie with China, who claims Arunachal Pradesh, an entire state, who has tried to have a string of pearls ports around India to restrain it. And they don't lie with Russia either. Russia has been the greatest outlaw of the 21st century in regard to established norms which India has adhered to, and that is against imperialism, against the invasion of another country by force trying to take it over. It is true that India has gotten some cheaper oil, not really that cheap, and it has gotten some arms. And it is not the case that India ought to cut off relations with China or Russia, certainly. But in long terms, this, in my view, is something that India is going to have to decide for itself. And if you look at the principles upon which an independent India was founded, they are not at all with China and Russia. Unfortunately, what you have indicated, particularly in public opinion, seems to be the case that what has happened with President Trump is he's driving India into the arms of China and Russia, and its long-term interest will not be served by that. So what has to happen, in my judgment, is that India is going to have to chart a course which is in accordance with its own values and try with a meeting between Modi and Trump or however to keep this situation from becoming irretrievable in terms of what ought to be a fundamental relationship between the two largest and I would argue greatest democracies in the world.
Well, somebody needs to remind Donald Trump of that. You make an excellent argument, but who's going to tell Donald Trump that, he is burning bridges with the world's largest democracy?
Yes, the problem is with President Trump It's not that he doesn't know, it's that he doesn't care,
He doesn't care.
because his orientation is
Hmm.
one of a narcissistic maniac. And that is what's in it for me at this particular time. And that's the reality. Now, that having been said, it's necessary to deal with the reality that India is presented, that other nations in the world are, and that includes Donald Trump. So I don't advocate a further break in relations, and one hopes that a Modi Trump summit will yield something, but it's not going to yield a long term benefit unless there's a principled stand by India, which I fully expect will happen.
Well, one can only hope that is the case. And I quite like your very apt descriptions of President Donald Trump. Earlier, you called him a real estate developer's approach. You said that's the approach he's adopted, in a very transactional one. And now you say that he is a narcissistic maniac. And that is where the problem lies, that Donald Trump may be aware of the significance of this relationship, but he doesn't seem to care. And there are many in India who believe that his growing hostility towards New Delhi really is driven much more by his personal pique than trade or India's purchase of Russian oil. But that's a different debate altogether. Ambassador Shashank, let me come back to you at this point. You know, number one, your take on RIC. Do you believe that with his growing hostility towards India, Donald Trump is actually pushing India closer to Russia and China? But how realistic really is the RIC proposition, given that, India and China have very fraught ties? And dealing with a hegemonic and expansionist and aggressive China is not going to be the easiest thing in the world to do for India. Also, what is your take on the larger argument that's being made about how the upheaval that's been unleashed by Donald Trump is really leading to some pretty big realignment of geopolitical forces?
Well, long-term strategy of USA and India has already been worked out. It is the short term which is creating the problem. And I agree with Raymond that the longer term, we'll have to now make it even longer term. It can't be made short in order to bring about better understanding between USA and India. Because I think at least for the next year or so, I don't think President Trump is going to change his mind. Pakistan will see to it that he does not change its mind. They will offer everything possible, whatever they were not willing to give to China. They will hand over everything, whether Balochistan, whether POK, whether Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, or even Punjab to President Trump. They will offer everything just to ensure that India does not get anywhere closer to the US, because that is a big bugbear for them. And the very fact that he made this announcement, that was just to make sure that USA has to take a very clear-cut position, either in favor of Pakistan or peace in Asia and South Asia. So USA, I think, is still uh, taking a hobbled kind of a position. They are not very sure whether to talk against the nuclear war in the region or to just listen to the whole thing and then hope that Munir will not be able to sort it out, will not be able to carry out his threat. The second thing is that India would like to keep definitely China restrained, a more peaceful neighbor. One is by going along with the Americans and taking all the American weaponry and training and having regular military exercises with the US. The second would be to tie up relations with countries in Eurasia on one side, countries with the Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia on the other, and BRICS in general at the interregional level. Because India knows very well that wherever China has gone, whether Malaysia, whether many African countries, whether even Pakistan, Sri Lanka, they have converted all their debt into equity by taking over charge of their lands and by trying to bribe the leaderships in these countries. And Pakistan is just trying to do something similar. I'm afraid that USA has fallen into that trap with Pakistan. What China has been trying to do in other parts, Pakistan has tried to do the same thing in USA. But Pakistan has an advantage that they gave everything what was necessary for us to have a more peaceful Middle East and to make sure that Iran does not go on supporting the Hamas in destroying Israel. So I think there are reasons why they have done it, but they have to keep under control so that the relationships in South Asia, in Asia, remain more peaceful. And we would, of course, very much like that somehow we carry on the dialogues with various countries in order to see that they behave in a more restrained fashion. Some of it can be by direct dialogue by us, but others would be by maintaining various kinds of regional and interregional uh, dialogues and various forums.
All right. Rabinder Sachdeva, let me ask you this question. There's been a lot of speculation about why Donald Trump is wooing Pakistan and Asim Munir the way he is, treating Asim Munir as a state guest by hosting a luncheon for him at the White House just weeks after the Pahalgam terror attack. Of course, in return, he got a nomination from Pakistan for a Nobel Peace Prize, among other things. Some say he's been doing this to needle India. Others say that there are other vested interests. For instance, Trump's own family is involved in some crypto deals with Pakistan, deals that the Pakistan army may have also invested in. And then there is another school of thought, as was mentioned by Ambassador Shashank, that perhaps the whole India, I beg your pardon, Pakistan, US love fest and bonhomie that we are witnessing has a whole Iran and Middle East angle to it. What is your take on why suddenly Donald Trump has found so much love for Pakistan and Asim Munir?
Thank you, Neha. In my mind, it seems to me it starts with America's and particularly Donald Trump's preference for strongmen leaders and a single window clearance with a leader of a country. Operation Sindoor and thereabouts, and also the visit of Zach Witkoff, who's the son of Steve Witkoff, Trump's buddy and the interlocutor. Zach is a partner with Trump's family. Donald Trump himself, his son Don, Eric, and his son Barron in World Liberty Financial, the crypto company you're referring to. So Zach's visit to Pakistan around the month of, I think, somewhere around Pahalgam and all, they struck a deal, an MOU, which may have future, but bottom line was what, 20 million odd dollars, no big deal. But they met, he met Asim Munir and he met Shahbaz Sharif and all, and they rolled out a red carpet. So that's one little component. The other little component I see is that whatever happened through Operation Sindoor and all, Trump has come to a conclusion that Munir is a strong guy in Pakistan. And actually, that seems to be so also. Militarily, as well as religion wise, he's the one who's talking about the Muslim race or the Qawm and Pakistan, Hindus and Muslims can never be together, etc. So due to these two things, which are combining in Asim Munir, and he's the only army chief ever of Pakistan who studied in a seminary, a madrasa,
Yes.
and become an army chief, right? So with these two things, Munir has emerged as a strong man in Pakistan. So a preference for dealing with strongmen leaders. In the background of, I think they made inside roads of family circles of Trump and Witkoff through that crypto business. There could be other ways they also reached. But I see that that's the base one where, and then it comes to the point that you say. Now, America, I think, is looking at not only India in this context, it's looking at Pakistan as, let's say, a base, a ring one. In the first ring, American strategy is looking at Iran because the Baluchistan border, through that border, they can send in, their weapons or special forces whenever America wants to destabilize Iran. That's there. And the other side is Afghanistan. America also need that. So first ring is being able to get intel and operative, control or access in these two. Then there is a wider ring. We should remember that Central Asia is right now kind of a no man's land in some ways. Sorry to say that way. It's getting sucked into China's orbit. Russia is, moving away. Russia doesn't have that. So there is play in Central Asia. And as Ray was mentioning, Trump is a real estate guy. Central Asia is prime real estate right now for American influence. And remember, they had an airbase in Kyrgyzstan up till 2014. Right. So America could look to down the line revive that, beef up its intel and other operating capacity. So I think what America is doing with Munir right now is not only Pakistan and Iran and all, and of course, again, they do not bother right now, it seems, what India thinks. For example, for the time being, he's saying, I will handle India later. So he is building up that. And yeah, he's a bit irritated with India because we've been kind of holding up on the trade deal and buying Russian oil and also being there in BRICS. So a combination of all of these things, American designs for this region of Central Asia and South Asia, I think that's one. Or before that, Munir as a strong man, he made inroads and relations into Trump's inner circles, okay, savvy, etc. And then American design, Central Asia, etc. And then India, okay, you've been kind of, reluctant, recalcitrant. I think that's what Treasury Secretary President is saying today. So India, fine, take these signals. So I think it's a mix of all of these aspects which is leading to where American foreign policy is right now.
Pretty comprehensive analysis from you, Rabinder Sachdeva. I wonder if Raymond Vickery agrees with your assessment. Mr. Vickery, we've been asking here in India, what explains Trump's newfound love for Pakistan and Asim Munir? Is it the fact that he's upset with India and he wants to needle India? Is it about his crypto deals with that country? Is it that he admires strong men and sees Asim Munir as one? Or is it the fact that Pakistan, that Donald Trump and the United States still see a lot of utility in having Pakistan as a quote-unquote ally, given its role in Afghanistan, its role vis-a-vis Iran and the larger Middle East picture, never mind the fact that Pakistan continues to be the exporter of terrorism around the world and harbored Osama bin Laden for 10 years?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to recognize that one of the most harmful aspects of Donald Trump's approach to South Asia has been to rehyphenate the relationship between Pakistan and India. Many of us have worked for 30, 35 years to dehyphenate, to have each country considered on its own merits. And the merits largely go with India as a great democracy. Well, we cooperated down the line on terrorism, whether it would come from Pakistan or wherever it came from. And that is now out the window. And so the question is why? And your other panelists have indicated many factors. The key factor, though, goes back to the question of ego and narcissistic approach. And that is that when the terrible atrocities took place up in April, President Trump wanted to be seen as the great peacemaker in his thrust for a Nobel Peace Prize.
And India denied him credit.
And they denied him credit. But Pakistan said, oh, you have all the credit, and we even think you ought to get a Nobel Peace Prize for this. Well, that plays right into the sweet spot of Donald Trump's ego. After that, as I said earlier, Donald Trump is a real estate man. He wants to do a transaction. Working with a strong man, supposedly in Pakistan, to make a deal is right up his alley. He doesn't have to worry about constitutional restraints as does Prime Minister Modi or public opinion. It's what we two strong guys will get together and decide. And Pakistan has sweetened the pot. They've not only on crypto, they've said offshore oil, we've got these great oil reserves, and you, Donald Trump, can be the beneficiary of that development. And you throw
Actually,
in
sorry to intervene here, but many believe it's the other way around. That it is Donald Trump that has broken the news to Pakistan that it has massive oil reserves, because apparently that announcement took many Pakistanis by surprise. Even they were not aware that they had these massive oil reserves that Trump was referring to.
Yeah, it could be that's the place. My own take on it is that there aren't any such reserves, or if they are, they're very limited. And this is a conflation of this, or an inflation of something that can be handed over to Donald Trump. And the second, and I guess the last point is, of course, Trump has prided himself through these two administrations of being anti-Iran. And right now, the military in Pakistan says, well, that's fine with us too. And we don't have to worry about civilizational ties or anything like that. So I think all of these factors, but it all comes back to feeding the ego of Donald Trump as the great man who makes these decisions and does it. It's unfortunate that India and the rest of the world has to deal with this. The question is containing the damage for the short run and looking to values and establishing institutions which can keep peace and prosperity throughout the world into the 21st century.
The only reassuring or comforting thought that I have at the moment is that relationships between countries transcend their leaders. However, the worry is that we still have 3.5 years of the Trump presidency left. It's going to be pretty complicated, it seems. I'll give you the last word, Ambassador Shashank. Raymond Vickery has talked about this. So many others around the world have talked about Donald Trump's big and fragile ego. Pakistan seems to have played him exceedingly well. There are some who've sardonically remarked and suggested that India should have perhaps acknowledged that Donald Trump is the greatest peacemaker to have ever walked the earth, that we bow to his greatness, and that he most certainly deserves the Nobel Peace Prize more than Mahatma Gandhi or anyone else. But too bad that India has chosen to stand its ground and continues to exercise strategic autonomy and has refused to give in to Donald Trump's bullying. Now, the question really is, how do you see the remaining 3.5 years of the Donald Trump presidency panning out as far as the India-US relationship is concerned, because it's already on a very sticky wicket? Are things going to get much worse between the two countries before they get better? And also, as was pointed out by Raymond Vickery, do we see a very unfortunate situation where India and Pakistan seem to have got rehyphenated all over again, thanks to Donald Trump's transactional and fairly irrational approach?
Okay, let me start with the last point about the rehyphenation. There is more in the mind of the Pakistanis and the American leadership. I don't think that hyphenation exists any longer. And everyone, all the experts, strategic experts, military experts, they all know it very well. So that is all over. The only point, important point, which one has to keep in mind, and the points made by Raymond Vickery are extremely important, that India and USA have worked long evenings, long nights to reach this stage. We should not feel so bad that we try to take a knee-jerk kind of a attitude and say, okay, now China would become our best friend. So that we have to keep in mind our long-term interests and make sure that China remains restrained, whether with one relationship with Russia, with the other Eurasian countries in SCO, whether in the East Asia Summit type of relationships, trade relationships which we build up in the Asian region, and also the trade relationship which we may build through BRICS and through other organizations. With America, we must continue our partnership. Whatever exercises, etc., are taking place, they must continue. Must continue to look at the opportunities of getting the equipment, military equipment that we might need from the American side. Of course, not the ones which we know we will not be able to use or not be able to integrate into our own forces. But I think we have to keep in mind that our actual usage immediately would be with Pakistan, because Operation Sindoor is still on. It has not been given up, and Pakistan is making one bellicose statement after the other to ensure that there is a bilateral kind of a dispute which is raised once again at a higher level. And if they can go back to the same rehyphenation globally with India, then that will be their game. India has to just make sure that on the ground it does not take place. Secondly, China, you have to make sure that they do not become such a great partner of Pakistan that they are having joint exercises. The planes are being flown jointly by the Pakistani and the Chinese pilots, because that their Americans are working very hard to dehyphenate that close relationship between Pakistan and China. We hope that Americans succeed in that, because ultimately it's the Chinese who have decided very clearly that they are going to be number one power in the world. Now, is that good for Asia? Is that good for South Asia? I don't think so. So therefore, we have to, but we cannot allow the kind of relationship which Pakistan wants to have with both with China on one hand, to get whatever weaponry they cannot get from the Americans, they will get it from the Chinese. And secondly, to do the bidding of the Americans with reference to Afghanistan, Iran, or wherever they want them from time to time, to do that and to make President Trump's family feel that they are very rich and they are doing much better. They are already billionaires, they can become multi.
You're right. And India refuses to be anybody's vassal state. I think that is what we need to remind ourselves. Pakistan is already seen practically as a Chinese satellite. And now they're happy to do Trump's bidding, while India is perhaps in many ways paying the price for exercising its strategic autonomy and saying we are not going to be dictated to by anybody. Well, on that note, Ambassador Shashank, Raymond Vickery, Rabinder Sachdeva, thank you so much to all three of you for joining me on Global Pulse tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having us.
Well, so all eyes will be on that big Trump-Putin summit that's scheduled to take place in Alaska in the United States later this week. What's going to come off it, and could that in fact determine whether Prime Minister Modi and President Trump are going to meet in New York next month? Watch this space for more. Thanks very much for tuning in to Global Pulse tonight.